My husband had been gone for exactly 3 days when his mother tried to take our house. Not asked about it, not discussed it, tried to take it. She walked into my living room, looked around, and said, "You'll need to be out by the end of the month." At first, I thought grief was affecting her judgment. My husband had just died. Everyone was hurting. Everyone was struggling. But then my sister-in-law started placing colored stickers on furniture. Red stickers, blue stickers, yellow stickers, like they were dividing property at a garage sale. My property, the couch my husband and I bought together, the dining table we saved for months to afford, even the photographs hanging on our walls. I stood there in shock while they discussed my future as if I wasn't in the room. And the worst part? They seemed completely certain they were entitled to everything. The house, the savings, my husband's business shares, everything. I spent 3 days wondering if I was about to lose the life we'd built together. Then a week later, we sat inside a lawyer's office. My mother-in-law smiled confidently. My sister-in-law already had plans for the house, and everyone seemed convinced they knew exactly what my husband had wanted. Then the lawyer opened a sealed letter. The first sentence made my mother-in-law stop smiling. The second made my sister-in-law turn pale. And by the time the letter was finished, the people trying to take everything had lost far more than they ever imagined. But to understand why that letter changed everything, you need to understand what happened after my husband died. Because the betrayal started before his funeral was even over. My name is Claire. I'm 36 years old. And for 12 years, my husband Ethan was my best friend. Not perfect, not dramatic, not some movie version of love. Real. The kind of relationship built through ordinary days, shared responsibilities, inside jokes, late-night conversations, and the quiet comfort of knowing someone always had your back. We met when I was 24. I was working 2 jobs, trying to pay off student loans, trying to build a future. Ethan walked into a coffee shop where I worked weekends and immediately ordered the one drink we didn't sell. I laughed. He laughed. Then he ordered something else. A week later, he came back. The week after that, he came back again. Eventually, he asked me to dinner. 12 years later, we were still laughing about that first conversation, or at least we were until the accident. The phone call came on a Thursday afternoon. I remember every detail: the weather, the traffic outside, the exact position of the coffee mug on my desk. Some moments become permanent. That moment was one of them. A truck crossed the center line. Ethan never made it home. The following days felt unreal. Family arrived, friends visited, meals appeared on the porch, flowers filled every available space. People kept saying the same thing: "If you need anything, let us know." Most meant it. Some didn't. Unfortunately, I wouldn't discover the difference until later. Ethan's family arrived the morning after the accident. His mother, Linda, his sister, Rebecca, and his uncle, Frank. At first, everything seemed normal. Sad, painful, but normal. Linda cried constantly. Rebecca helped organize funeral arrangements. Frank handled phone calls. I appreciated their support, at least initially. Then little things started happening. Strange things. Conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Whispers. Sudden silence. The feeling that people were discussing something they didn't want me hearing. At first, I blamed grief. Everyone processes loss differently. That explanation made sense. Until the funeral. The funeral changed everything. After the service, guests gathered in small groups outside the chapel, sharing memories, offering condolences, remembering Ethan. I was speaking with one of Ethan's co-workers when I overheard Rebecca talking nearby. "Mom should get the house." I froze. The house? Our house? I turned slightly. Rebecca continued speaking. "She's family." The statement confused me, because I was family too, or at least I thought I was. Then Linda answered, "Let's wait until after the lawyer meeting." The lawyer meeting. A meeting I hadn't even heard about yet. My stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. Very much not right. Later that evening, after most guests had left, Linda sat across from me in my own living room. She looked serious, determined, like someone preparing for an important conversation. Then she said the words that changed everything. "Claire, we need to discuss Ethan's assets." Assets, not memories, not grief, not healing. Assets. I stared at her. Ethan's been gone less than 48 hours. Linda sighed. As difficult as this is, practical matters can't wait. The response felt cold, almost rehearsed. Then Rebecca joined the conversation. And things became worse, much worse, because for the first time they started explaining what they believed belonged to them. And according to them, that included almost everything Ethan and I had spent 12 years building together. Where the estate begins. Continue part 2. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. I sat in silence, still trying to process what Rebecca had just said. Assets. My husband had been gone for less than 2 days, and somehow the conversation had already shifted from grief to ownership. Linda folded her hands neatly in her lap. There are certain things Ethan always intended to keep in the family. I stared at her. He was family. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Linda's expression tightened. That's not what I meant. But it was exactly what she meant. I could hear it, feel it. For the first time in 12 years, I wasn't Ethan's wife. I was simply an obstacle, a temporary person standing between them and what they wanted. Rebecca leaned forward. The house has been in Ethan's family for generations. I blinked. No. Rebecca frowned. Excuse me? The land was. I pointed toward the window. The house was built 6 years ago. By Ethan. And me. We spent months choosing floor plans, arguing about paint colors, saving for renovations. Every room carried our fingerprints. Every wall held memories. But Rebecca dismissed all of that with a wave of her hand. Still family property. I looked at Linda. Surely she would correct her. She didn't. Instead, she nodded, as though the decision had already been made, as though my opinion was irrelevant. The realization hurt more than I expected. Because these weren't strangers. These were people who attended our wedding, people who celebrated anniversaries with us, people who smiled in family photographs. Yet now they looked at me like I was temporary, like Ethan had died and erased 12 years of marriage. Then came the savings account. Linda mentioned it casually. Ethan always wanted his family taken care of. I stared at her. We are his family. Again, neither woman responded. And suddenly the room felt very small, very cold. That night I barely slept. Every conversation replayed in my head, every comment, every glance, every assumption. The following morning, things became even stranger. I walked into the garage and found Rebecca taking photographs. Photographs of Ethan's tools, his equipment, his motorcycle. I stopped immediately. What are you doing? Rebecca jumped, then quickly recovered. Just organizing. Organizing. Another word that sounded harmless, but felt dangerous. Especially when she already had a list in her hand. A list divided into columns, items, values, names, as though property distribution had already begun. I felt anger rise in my chest, for the first time since Ethan died. Not grief, not sadness, anger. Because this wasn't about honoring Ethan. This was about claiming things, and they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Later that afternoon, Uncle Frank arrived. Frank had always been respected in the family. Practical, confident, opinionated. The kind of person who assumed everyone should listen to him. After dinner, he pulled me aside. Claire. His tone sounded almost sympathetic. You should prepare yourself. I frowned. For what? Frank sighed. The estate process. My stomach tightened. What about it? He hesitated, then said something shocking. Legally doesn't always mean morally. I stared at him. What does that mean? Frank crossed his arms. It means Ethan's family deserves consideration. The statement stunned me, because it implied something very specific. That I didn't. That somehow 12 years of marriage mattered less than blood. I didn't answer, because I suddenly understood something important. This wasn't Rebecca's idea, or Linda's. The entire family had been discussing this, planning, preparing. long before they ever spoke to me. 3 days later, I received a call from attorney James Parker, Ethan's lawyer, the same lawyer who handled his business matters. His tone was professional, calm, measured. "Mrs. Carter, we will be holding a formal estate meeting next Thursday." I nodded. "Okay." Then he added something unexpected. "There are several documents Mr. Carter specifically requested be presented in person." I paused. "Several documents?" "Yes." His voice remained neutral. "And a personal letter." A letter. My heart skipped. Because Ethan wasn't the type to write unnecessary letters. He preferred conversations, direct conversations, which meant if he'd written a letter, it mattered. A lot. That evening, I found myself thinking about something Ethan said months earlier. At the time, it seemed random. We had been sitting on the porch after dinner, watching the sunset, talking about nothing important. Then suddenly he looked at me and smiled. "If anything ever happens to me," I immediately interrupted. "Don't start," he laughed. "I'm serious." I rolled my eyes. "Ethan," but he continued, "if anything happens, remember one thing." I looked at him. "What?" His smile widened. "I know exactly who you are." At the time, I thought he was being sentimental. Now I wondered if he meant something more. Because as the lawyer meeting approached, the behavior of his family became increasingly confident. Linda started talking about future renovations to the house. Rebecca discussed selling some of Ethan's equipment. Frank spoke as though outcomes had already been decided. And every conversation carried the same assumption: that I would lose, that I would step aside quietly, that I would accept whatever they decided. What none of them realized was that Ethan had spent the last year preparing for something nobody except his lawyer knew about. And hidden inside a sealed envelope was a truth powerful enough to stop every plan they had already started making. As the lawyer meeting grew closer, Ethan's family became strangely confident. Not hopeful, not optimistic, confident. The difference mattered, because people who are hopeful still have doubts. People who are confident believe they already know the outcome. And Linda, Rebecca, and Uncle Frank acted like the estate had already been settled, as though the lawyer meeting was merely paperwork, as though Ethan's wishes were already known, as though I had already lost. The behavior bothered me, because none of them had seen the documents. At least they shouldn't have. Yet they spoke with certainty, the kind of certainty that comes from believing your version of events is the only version that matters. One afternoon, I came home from meeting with funeral planners and found Rebecca inside the garage again. This time she wasn't taking photographs, she was placing sticky notes on boxes. Yellow notes, blue notes, green notes. I stopped immediately. "What are you doing?" Rebecca looked annoyed rather than embarrassed. "I'm organizing." The same word again. Organizing. I walked closer. The sticky notes contained names, family members' names. My stomach dropped, because Ethan's belongings were being assigned to people, before the estate had even been discussed, before the lawyer meeting, before anyone knew what Ethan actually wanted. I looked at her. "You can't do this." Rebecca shrugged. "We're just preparing." Preparing. Another harmless word hiding an ugly reality. Because nobody prepares for outcomes they aren't expecting. And Rebecca clearly expected something very specific. That evening, I called Attorney Parker. Not because I wanted details. I knew he couldn't provide them. I simply needed reassurance. Something. Anything. When he answered, I explained the situation, the conversations, the assumptions, the behavior. He listened quietly, then said something interesting. "Mrs. Carter, has anyone seen the estate documents?" "No." "Has anyone seen the letter?" "No." A brief pause followed. Then he said, "Then I would be careful about trusting predictions." The statement seemed simple, but the tone wasn't. For the first time, I sensed something beneath his professionalism. Not concern. Confidence. Real confidence. The kind that comes from knowing information other people don't. After the call ended, I couldn't stop thinking about it, especially when I remembered another conversation with Ethan, a conversation from almost a year earlier. At the time, it seemed insignificant. Now it felt important. We had been cleaning the kitchen after dinner, one of those ordinary evenings couples forget, except for one moment. Ethan suddenly asked, "If something happened to me, would you trust me?" I laughed. "What kind of question is that?" He smiled. "Just answer it." I rolled my eyes. "Of course." His expression softened. "Good." Then he kissed my forehead and changed the subject. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now I wondered if he had already been planning something nobody knew about. The next few days became increasingly uncomfortable. Family members started choosing sides. Some supported me, others clearly supported Linda, and a few tried to avoid the conflict entirely. One aunt called and quietly warned me. "People are talking." I sighed. "What are they saying?" The pause told me everything. Then she answered. "They think Ethan wanted everything to stay with his family." The statement hurt. Not because it was true, because it wasn't. I was his family. For 12 years, 12 birthdays, 12 anniversaries, 12 years of building a life together. Yet somehow after his death, some people acted as though marriage disappeared, as though blood automatically mattered more than commitment. The closer the meeting got, the worse it became. Then came the moment that changed everything. 3 days before the lawyer meeting, I found Linda sitting in my kitchen, waiting for me. Her expression was serious, determined. The moment I walked inside, I knew this wasn't a casual conversation. Linda folded her hands, then spoke. "You should start thinking about your future." I frowned. "My future?" She nodded. "The house won't be easy to maintain alone." My pulse quickened. Because she wasn't speaking hypothetically. She was speaking as though the house already belonged to someone else, as though decisions had already been made. I looked directly at her. "Why are you so certain?" For the first time, Linda hesitated, only briefly, but I noticed. Then she answered, "Because I know my son." The statement stayed with me long after she left, because the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Linda knew her son, but so did I. And Ethan would never have wanted this. Never. The day before the lawyer meeting arrived, I barely slept. Every possible outcome played through my mind. What if they were right? What if Ethan had changed something? What if I discovered he wanted something completely different than I believed? The fear felt overwhelming. Then, at 7 o'clock that evening, my phone rang. Attorney Parker. I answered immediately. "Hello?" His voice sounded calm, professional. But there was something else, something unusual. "Mrs. Carter, I wanted to confirm tomorrow's meeting." "Of course." A brief pause followed. Then he added, "And there is one more thing." My heart began racing. "What is it?" His answer was simple. "Mr. Carter left very specific instructions." Silence. Then, "Tomorrow, everyone will finally hear them." The call ended. And for the first time since Ethan died, I felt something other than grief. Hope. Because somewhere inside that lawyer's office sat a sealed letter, a letter Ethan had written himself, and whatever was inside it, Attorney Parker seemed absolutely certain it would change everything. The next morning arrived faster than I expected. I barely slept. Every possible outcome had played through my head all night. By 9:30, I was sitting in the parking lot outside Attorney Parker's office. My hands trembled slightly as I stared at the building. This was it. The meeting that would determine everything. The house, the savings, Ethan's business interests, his final wishes, everything. For a moment, I considered staying in the car, just driving away, because grief was already exhausting, and whatever happened inside that office would only make things harder. Then I remembered Ethan, his smile, his laugh, his confidence, and most importantly, his words. "If something happens to me, trust me." So I got out of the car. Inside, the conference room was already filling. Linda sat near the head of the table. Rebecca sat beside her. Uncle Frank occupied a chair nearby. Several cousins and relatives had also arrived, and something immediately stood out. They looked relaxed, far too relaxed, like people attending a celebration, not an estate meeting. Rebecca was even smiling, actually smiling. The sight made my stomach twist, because Ethan had been gone less than 2 weeks, yet she looked excited. Then I noticed something else. Folders. Rebecca had brought folders, several of them, color-coded, labeled, organized, as though she had already planned where everything would go. When she saw me enter, her smile faded, only slightly, but I noticed. Linda nodded politely, the same polite smile she'd worn for days, the smile that never reached her eyes. Attorney Parker entered a few moments later carrying a large black case. The room immediately became quiet, very quiet. He greeted everyone professionally, then took his seat. "Thank you for coming." Nobody responded. The tension was too heavy. Attorney Parker opened the case. Inside were multiple folders, several sealed envelopes, and a thick stack of legal documents. The sight immediately caught everyone's attention, especially Linda's. Because for the first time, uncertainty appeared on her face. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, then spoke. "Mr. Carter left extensive instructions." The room remained silent. He was very clear regarding how this meeting should proceed. Something about that sentence felt important, very important, because Ethan wasn't someone who left things to chance. If he had given instructions, there was a reason. Attorney Parker removed a sealed envelope, a large cream-colored envelope. Across the front, written in Ethan's handwriting, were 5 words. "Read this before anything else." The room froze, completely froze. Even Rebecca stopped moving. Attorney Parker looked around the table, then carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, several pages long. The lawyer unfolded the first page, then began reading. "To my family." The moment the words left his mouth, emotion hit me unexpectedly, because I could hear Ethan's voice behind every sentence. If this letter is being read, then I wasn't given the chance to say these things myself. Several relatives lowered their eyes. Attorney Parker continued. "Before discussing money, property, or inheritance, there is something more important that needs to be addressed." The room became even quieter. "Claire." My breath caught. The lawyer looked directly at me, then continued. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Instantly, tears filled my eyes. Across the room, several relatives looked surprised, as though they hadn't expected the letter to begin with me. Attorney Parker kept reading. "You stood beside me during every difficult year. You supported me when business was failing. You celebrated with me when things improved. You built a life with me." The room was silent. No whispers, no interruptions, only Ethan's words. "Anyone who suggests otherwise misunderstands what family means." I heard Rebecca shift uncomfortably, then Linda, then Uncle Frank, because they understood exactly what Ethan was saying, and exactly who he was saying it to. The lawyer continued. "Family is not determined by who shares your last name. Family is determined by who shares your life." Several relatives exchanged glances. The confidence from earlier had vanished, completely vanished. Then came the sentence that changed the atmosphere. "Claire is not an outsider. She is my family. She always will be." Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that appears when expectations begin collapsing. Attorney Parker turned another page, then read, "Which is why I need everyone in this room to understand something very clearly." The lawyer paused, not dramatically, simply because the next paragraph was highlighted by Ethan himself. Attorney Parker looked around the room, then continued, "No one is entitled to anything I leave behind." The room instantly became tense. "Inheritance is not a reward for being related to me. It is a reflection of my choices." Linda's expression changed immediately. So did Rebecca's. because Ethan was destroying the assumptions they had built everything upon, one sentence at a time. Then Attorney Parker reached the final page of the letter, and his expression shifted, only slightly. But enough for me to notice, enough for everyone to notice, because whatever came next was important, very important. The lawyer looked up, then read Ethan's final instruction. Before my estate is discussed, there is one document everyone must see. The room became completely silent. Attorney Parker reached into the black case and removed a second sealed envelope. This one was much thicker. Across the front were 7 handwritten words. Proof, in case anyone questions me. The color immediately drained from Rebecca's face. Linda stopped breathing. And for the first time all morning, neither of them looked confident anymore. Because somehow, Ethan had anticipated exactly what would happen after his death, and whatever was inside that envelope was about to destroy every plan they thought they had already won. The conference room felt smaller, heavier, more tense. No one spoke as Attorney Parker held the second envelope in his hands. Proof, in case anyone questions me. The words were written in Ethan's handwriting, clear, intentional, almost as if he had known this exact moment would happen. Attorney Parker carefully broke the seal. Inside were documents, dozens of them, emails, property records, financial statements, signed declarations, and something else. A notebook. A thick black notebook. The lawyer placed it on the table. This was provided to me 6 months before Mr. Carter's death. Linda immediately leaned forward. What is it? Attorney Parker looked at her. A record. The room became silent. A record of concerns Mr. Carter wanted documented. My stomach tightened, because suddenly I understood. Ethan hadn't simply written a letter. He had prepared evidence, months before his death. The lawyer opened the notebook. Inside were dated entries, page after page, recorded conversations, observations, concerns, instructions, everything written by Ethan himself. Attorney Parker turned to the first highlighted section, then began reading. March 14th. Rebecca suggested that Claire wouldn't know how to manage the house alone. The room froze. I informed her the house belongs equally to Claire and me. Rebecca immediately looked down. Attorney Parker continued. April 3rd. Mother asked whether family property should remain with blood relatives. Linda's face lost color. I reminded her that Claire is my family. Several relatives exchanged uncomfortable looks. The lawyer continued turning pages. Each entry told the same story, again and again. Family members questioning Claire's place, family members discussing assets, family members assuming things that Ethan clearly disagreed with. Then Attorney Parker stopped at a bookmarked page, a page marked with a red tab. His expression became serious, very serious. Mr. Carter specifically instructed me to read this section aloud. The room became completely silent. If anyone attempts to argue that Claire is not real family, several people visibly tensed, then they have fundamentally misunderstood everything I value. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Because Ethan's voice was unmistakable, firm, direct, the same way he always spoke when something mattered. Marriage is not temporary. Commitment is not temporary. The life Claire and I built together is not temporary. Linda closed her eyes. Rebecca stared at the table. And for the first time, both looked genuinely uncomfortable, not defensive, ashamed. Then came the part nobody expected. Attorney Parker removed another document, a signed affidavit, witnessed, notarized, legally binding. The lawyer looked around the room, then read, I am making this statement voluntarily and without pressure. Any claim that Claire should receive less because she married into the family is directly against my wishes. The room exploded into whispers. Immediately. Because Ethan hadn't left room for interpretation. He hadn't left gray areas. He hadn't left loopholes. He had anticipated every argument and answered them before they could happen. Then, Attorney Parker lifted the final document, the thickest file in the envelope, the inheritance file. The room instantly became silent again, because now everyone understood something important. They hadn't been preparing for Ethan's wishes. They had been preparing for their assumptions. And Ethan's wishes were something entirely different. Attorney Parker opened the file, then began reading. According to the final estate instructions of Ethan Carter, my heart pounded. Linda gripped the armrest of her chair. Rebecca stopped blinking. Uncle Frank sat perfectly still. No confidence remained. No certainty. Only anticipation. Then the lawyer read the first line, and everything changed. The marital residence shall transfer in full ownership to Claire Carter. Silence. Absolute silence. The house. Not divided. Not shared. Not contested. Mine. Exactly as Ethan intended. Rebecca looked stunned. Linda looked as though she had forgotten how to speak. But Attorney Parker wasn't finished. Not even close. Because the next page contained a surprise Ethan had kept secret from everyone. A surprise so unexpected that by the end of the meeting, the people who tried to take everything would realize they had never understood Ethan at all. The conference room was completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Attorney Parker adjusted the inheritance file, then continued reading. The marital residence shall transfer in full ownership to Claire Carter. The words hung in the air, heavy, final, undeniable. Linda stared at the table. Rebecca looked stunned. But Attorney Parker wasn't finished. Not even close. He turned the page, then read the next section. All personal savings accounts, retirement investments, and life insurance proceeds shall transfer directly to Claire Carter. A gasp escaped from somewhere across the room. Several relatives exchanged shocked looks, because everyone had assumed the house was the major asset. It wasn't, not even close. Ethan had spent years building financial security, and every major account had been left to me, exactly as he intended. Rebecca shook her head. This can't be right. Attorney Parker calmly slid a document across the table. Signed, dated, witnessed, notarized, completely legal. Rebecca immediately fell silent. Then came Ethan's business interests, the shares, the investments, the ownership stakes, everything. Attorney Parker read carefully. All ownership interests shall remain under the control of Claire Carter. The room became silent again, because there was no ambiguity, no percentages, no divisions, no shared authority. Ethan had trusted one person, and that person was me. Then Attorney Parker opened a final folder, a folder nobody else had seen, not even me. His expression softened slightly. This section contains Mr. Carter's final personal instructions. My chest tightened, because suddenly this wasn't about money anymore. It was about Ethan. The lawyer unfolded a handwritten page, then began reading. Claire. The room disappeared. For a moment, it felt like Ethan was speaking directly to me. If you're hearing this, then I know you're probably trying to stay strong for everyone else. Tears filled my eyes immediately, because he knew me. He always had. You never liked asking for help. A few relatives smiled sadly, because it was true. And you're probably worried about what happens next. The lawyer paused briefly, then continued. Don't be. My vision blurred. You spent 12 years helping me build a life worth protecting. Everything I've left behind belongs to the future we built together. Several people wiped away tears, even some relatives who had supported Linda, because Ethan's words weren't angry, they weren't vindictive, they were honest. Then came the sentence nobody expected. And before anyone feels disappointed, the room grew quiet again. I have already provided for the people I wanted to help while I was alive. Several heads turned toward Linda, then toward Rebecca. because suddenly everyone understood. Ethan hadn't forgotten them. He had made a choice, a deliberate choice, and there was a difference. Attorney Parker continued. An inheritance isn't proof of love. It's simply a reflection of responsibility. The room became still. Claire carried responsibilities with me every day, which is why I trust her with everything that remains. Linda lowered her head. Rebecca looked close to tears. Not because they lost money, because for the first time they realized what Ethan had actually thought, and it wasn't what they expected. Then Attorney Parker reached the final page, the last page, Ethan's final words. To my family, everyone looked up. Grief has a way of revealing character. Nobody moved. You can spend your energy fighting over what I've left behind. Or you can spend it remembering why I mattered in the first place. Silence. Absolute silence. I hope you choose wisely. Attorney Parker lowered the paper. The meeting was over. No dramatic argument followed. No shouting. No legal battle. Just silence. The kind of silence that arrives when the truth finally leaves no room for debate. One by one, relatives stood. Several approached me. Some apologized. Others admitted they had assumed the worst. A few simply hugged me, then quietly left. Eventually, only a handful of people remained, including Linda. For several moments, she stared at the empty chair beside her, then looked at me. Her eyes were red. I thought I knew what he wanted. I didn't answer immediately, because grief was sitting between us. Not anger, not resentment. Grief. Finally, I spoke. We all did. Linda nodded slowly, then began crying. Not the dramatic crying I'd seen at the funeral. Real crying. The kind that comes when denial finally disappears. Rebecca apologized too. Quietly. Awkwardly. Without excuses. And for the first time since Ethan died, I believed she meant it. Months later, life slowly began moving forward. Not back to normal. Normal was gone. But forward. I kept the house. I continued managing the investments, and eventually I found something hidden inside Ethan's desk. A small envelope. My name written on the front. Inside was a photograph from our first apartment. We were young, broke, happy. On the back, Ethan had written a single sentence. The best thing I ever built wasn't a business. It was us. I framed it and placed it on my desk. Because after everything that happened, after the arguments, the greed, the betrayal, the lawyer's office, the inheritance, that sentence mattered more than any asset, more than any house, more than any account, because Ethan's greatest legacy wasn't what he left behind. It was the life we created together, and nobody could take that away.